In the heart of Lagos, there lived a young man named Jude, a spoiled child born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He never lacked for anything, as his parents doted upon him endlessly. His father, Senator James, was a prominent and wealthy politician known for his philanthropic endeavors. His mother, Dr. Ruth, was a respected medical consultant, her expertise in high demand across Africa. Jude was their only child and the heir to his father's vast wealth. From a tender age, he exhibited a sense of entitlement and disregard for authority. At the prestigious primary school where his parents paid an exorbitant fee of 500,000 naira per term, Jude showed no interest in education. He would insult his classmates and disrespect his teachers, secure in the knowledge that his family's influence would shield him from consequences. When Jude advanced to secondary school, his behavior only worsened. His constant disruptive antics and blatant disregard for the rules nearly led to his expulsion, but his father, Senator James, intervened, leveraging his status and connections to keep his son enrolled. The senator felt remorse for not instilling proper values in Jude from birth, but he couldn't bring himself to truly discipline his only child. Senator James blamed his wife, Dr. Ruth, for Jude's entitled attitude. Her demanding career often kept her away from home, and she would attempt to assuage her guilt by showering Jude with money whenever he claimed he wanted to chat with her. Blinded by her own success and the belief that material wealth could substitute for maternal love, she failed to notice the depth of Jude's emotional neglect. As Jude grew into his teenage years, the lavish lifestyle afforded by his parents' wealth did little to fill the void within him. Despite having every material possession a young man could desire, he felt an emptiness that no amount of money could satiate. The constant absence of his parents, each consumed by their respective careers, left an indelible mark on his psyche. Tensions mounted between Jude and his father, Senator James. The senator, a man of principle and discipline in his professional life, found himself at a loss when it came to reining in his son's unruly behavior. Their disagreements often escalated into heated arguments, with Jude defiantly asserting his independence and rejecting his father's attempts at guidance. With no moral compass to guide him, Jude spiraled into a life of excess and debauchery. He frequented the hottest nightclubs in Lagos, indulging in alcohol and substances. His exploits often splashed across the pages of tabloids. The once promising heir to a political dynasty had become a cautionary tale, a living embodiment of the perils of unchecked privilege. As Jude neared the end of his secondary education, the time came for him to write the JAMB exam, the crucial gateway to university admission in Nigeria. Despite his lackadaisical attitude toward academics, Senator James insisted on providing his son with every opportunity to succeed. Jude was enrolled in intensive extra lessons with private tutors, but his lack of discipline proved to be a formidable obstacle. It took him 3 attempts before he finally passed the JAMB exam. Owing to his father's unwavering commitment to education, Jude secured admission to University of Nigeria, Nsukka, one of the most prestigious institutions in Nigeria. Senator James believed that the structured environment and academic rigor would instill a sense of purpose and responsibility in his wayward son. With cautious optimism, the family embarked on this new chapter, hoping it would mark a turning point in Jude's journey towards maturity and self-discovery. As the old adage goes, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Despite his father's efforts and the prestigious environment of UNN, Jude's spoiled nature proved difficult to overcome. He continued his wayward path, squandering the opportunities presented to him. In lectures, Jude would often doze off, showing little interest in the course material. He chose to study business administration. His disruptive behavior drew the ire of professors who struggled to maintain discipline in their classrooms. Jude's academic performance suffered as a result, his grades hovering dangerously close to failing marks. Outside the classroom, Jude's entitled attitude led to frequent conflicts with his peers. He would pick fights with other students over trivial matters, his wealthy background fueling a sense of superiority. Campus security was frequently called to intervene and diffuse the volatile situations Jude found himself in. Weekends were a blur of parties and excess, as Jude indulged in alcohol and other substances with reckless abandon. His father's wealth ensured a steady supply of vices, and Jude reveled in the hedonistic lifestyle, ignoring the consequences of his actions. Senator James was forced to intervene on multiple occasions, using his influence and connections to prevent his son's expulsion from the university. It was only through the senator's tireless efforts and the understanding of a few sympathetic lecturers that Jude managed to scrape through and ultimately graduate. As Jude collected his degree, a testament to his father's unwavering commitment rather than his own merit, the future seemed uncertain. Would this milestone serve as a wake-up call, prompting him to reevaluate his priorities? Or would he continue down the path of self-destruction, squandering the opportunities his privileged upbringing had afforded him? Jude's university journey came to an unceremonious end as he collected his degree, a mere third-class qualification that did little to reflect the immense sacrifice and resources his father had invested. It was a sobering reminder that privilege alone could not guarantee success without personal drive and determination. For Senator James, his son's lackluster academic performance was a bitter pill to swallow. He had hoped that the structured environment of University of Nigeria Nsukka would instill discipline and ambition in Jude. Yet, despite his best efforts, Jude had squandered the opportunity, coasting through with the bare minimum effort required to graduate. Nevertheless, the senator remained optimistic, clinging to the belief that his son would find purpose and direction once he completed his mandatory youth service. Perhaps then, Jude would be ready to take on the responsibility of the family's business empire, a legacy that Senator James had painstakingly built over decades of hard work and sacrifice. Alas, Jude's indifference persisted even after fulfilling his national service obligation. Despite his father's pleas and offers to gradually introduce him to the family's business operations, Jude showed no interest whatsoever. His sole concern was ensuring the steady flow of his monthly allowance, a source of income that allowed him to maintain his carefree, indulgent lifestyle without the burden of actual work. For Senator James, this was a harsh reality to accept. The hopes he had harbored for his only son to eventually take over the reins of the family's legacy now lay in tatters. As he contemplated his next steps, a profound sense of disappointment and weariness settled upon him, the culmination of years spent trying to guide a son who seemed determined to reject his father's wisdom at every turn. One Sunday afternoon, following the family's customary church service, Senator James decided it was time for a frank discussion with his son. As they sat down for their weekly lunch, the atmosphere was thick with tension, the unspoken words hanging heavily between them. "Jude, my son," the senator began, his voice tinged with a weariness that belied his years of toil. "I've given you every opportunity in life, spared no expense in ensuring your education and comfort. Yet you seem content to squander it all, drifting aimlessly without purpose or ambition." Jude met his father's gaze with a defiant stare, his body language radiating indifference. "What do you want from me, Dad?" he retorted, his tone laced with resentment. "I completed my education, did my youth service, just like you wanted. Why can't you just let me live my life the way I choose?" The senator's composure began to fray, his frustration boiling over. "Live your life?" he bellowed, his voice reverberating through the cavernous dining room. "You think this is living, wasting your days lounging about and frittering away my hard-earned wealth?" "Oh, here we go again," Jude scoffed, rolling his eyes dismissively. "The same old lecture about responsibility and carrying on the family legacy. When will you understand, Dad? I don't care about your business empire or living up to your expectations." The words stung like a physical blow, and Senator James recoiled as if struck. All the hopes and dreams he had harbored for his son, the sacrifices he had made, seemed to crumble before him in that moment. With a heavy heart and slumped shoulders, he realized that no amount of reasoning or pleading would sway Jude's stubborn indifference. The heated exchange escalated further, with Jude abruptly storming out of the dining room, leaving his father alone to wrestle with the bitter disappointment and anguish that threatened to consume him. As the echoes of their raised voices faded, Senator James was left to ponder where he had gone wrong and whether there was any hope of salvaging the relationship with his wayward son. The echoes of the heated argument between father and son still hung in the air like a thick fog when Dr. Ruth, her heart heavy with maternal concern, made her way to Jude's bedroom. With a trembling hand, she knocked gently on the door, hoping to reason with her son where her husband had failed. "What do you want?" Jude spat, flinging open the door with such force that it nearly came off its hinges. His eyes were ablaze with resentment, the mere sight of his mother seeming to stoke the flames of his rage. Taken aback by her son's hostile demeanor, Dr. Ruth flinched momentarily before gathering her composure. Drawing in a deep breath, she met Jude's fiery gaze with a steady, imploring look. "Jude, please. I heard the argument with your father. This has to stop. You're tearing this family apart with your selfish behavior." "Selfish?" Jude scoffed, his lips curling into a sneer of contempt. "That's rich, coming from you. Where was this concern for our family when you were always away, putting your precious career before your own son?" The words cut deep, striking at the core of Dr. Ruth's long-held guilt over her perceived failings as a mother. Her face fell, the anguish she had carried for years writ large upon her features. "Jude, I know I made mistakes, but I'm trying to make amends. Please, don't push us away like this." But Jude was unmoved, his defenses fortified by years of resentment and emotional neglect. "Save your breath, Mother," he spat, the venom in his voice causing Dr. Ruth to recoil. "You had your chance to be a real parent and you blew it. Now leave me alone and let me live my life the way I want, without your constant nagging." With those cutting words, Jude slammed the door in his mother's face, leaving her standing in the hallway, crestfallen and awash in tears. As the sobs racked her body, Dr. Ruth realized the depths of the chasm that had grown between her and her son, a seemingly impassable divide that threatened to tear the family asunder. The resounding thud of the slammed door reverberated through Dr. Ruth's very being, the finality of it like a physical blow. For long moments, she remained rooted in the hallway, her back pressed against the wall as she struggled to regain her composure. Muffled sobs escaped her lips, the anguish of a mother's broken heart laid bare. Yet even in the depths of her despair, a flicker of resolve burned within Dr. Ruth's soul. She had spent too many years failing as a parent, allowing the chasm between herself and her son to widen with each passing day. No more, she vowed, straightening her posture and wiping away the tears that stained her cheeks. With a deep, steadying breath, she turned and rapped firmly upon Jude's door once more, her knuckles rapping out a staccato rhythm that belied her inner turmoil. "Jude!" she called out, her voice tinged with a newfound determination. "I know I've made mistakes, grave ones, but I refuse to give up on you, on us." From behind the door, Jude's muffled voice snarled back, laced with venom. "Go away. I meant what I said. Leave me alone." Undeterred, Dr. Ruth pressed her palm against the unyielding wood, as if attempting to breach the physical barrier that separated her from her son's heart. "I can't do that, Jude," she pleaded, her voice thick with emotion. "You're my child, my flesh and blood. I failed you for so long, but I swear on my life I will make things right between us." For several tense moments, silence hung in the air, the weight of it suffocating. Then, from behind the door, a muffled sigh, a glimmer of resignation amidst the tempest of anger and resentment. Renewing her vigil, Dr. Ruth rested her forehead against the unyielding barrier, fresh tears trickling down her cheeks. Yet even as the salt stung her eyes, a fragile hope blossomed in her breast. She would not abandon her son, not again. Come what may, she would weather this storm, clinging to the belief that love, persistence, and atonement could one day breach the walls Jude had erected around his heart. The muffled sounds of anguished sobs drew Senator James down the hallway, his brow furrowed with concern. There, huddled against Jude's bedroom door, he found his wife, Dr. Ruth, a broken figure racked by the weight of a mother's shattered dreams. "Ruth, my love," he murmured, his voice a balm against the rawness of her pain. Gently, he took her by the elbow, helping her to her feet, as his own eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Come, there's nothing more we can do here tonight." Offering little resistance, Dr. Ruth leaned heavily against her husband's sturdy frame, allowing him to guide her down the corridor and into the sanctuary of their bedroom. Once inside, she crumpled onto the edge of the bed, her body heaving with the force of her sobs. Without a word, Senator James took a seat beside her, wrapping a comforting arm around her trembling shoulders. For long moments, they simply sat, united in their grief, drawing what solace they could from each other's embrace. At last, Dr. Ruth lifted her head, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen, but burning with a determined fire. "James, we can't give up on him," she rasped, her voice hoarse from the force of her anguished cries. "I know the road ahead is long and the path is shrouded in darkness, but we have to keep trying." Senator James met her gaze, his own eyes reflecting the depths of his weariness and pain. Yet he nodded solemnly. Taking her hand in his, he gave it a reassuring squeeze. "You're right, my love. Our son may have strayed, but he is still our flesh and blood. We brought him into this world, and it is our sacred duty to guide him back from the brink, no matter how arduous the journey." A flicker of hope stirred within Dr. Ruth's breast as she rested her head against her husband's shoulder, their fingers intertwining in a silent vow. Though the road ahead was fraught with challenges, they would face them together, united in their love for their wayward son. Come what may, they would not abandon Jude to the demons that plagued him. They would wage an unyielding battle for his soul, fueled by the inextinguishable flame of a parent's devotion. After that day, Senator James and Dr. Ruth decided to keep trying to help their son Jude. But then they had to go on a business trip to Australia because Senator James's company works in many countries. Senator James had an important meeting with investors in Australia, so he and Dr. Ruth got on a plane to go there together. As the plane was getting ready to take off, dark storm clouds were gathering outside. Neither Senator James nor Dr. Ruth knew this routine business trip would be their last. During the flight, the plane started shaking very hard from bad turbulence. The pilots had never seen such bad turbulence before. Everything was falling out of the overhead bins and people were screaming in fear. Even though the pilots tried their best, they could not control the plane anymore because of the powerful winds and heavy rain. In just moments, the plane started falling down very fast while spinning out of control. The plane crashed hard into the ground and broke into many pieces. Thick, black smoke was rising up from the wreckage.
Before we continue, if you're enjoying this fascinating folktale, subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss out on more entertaining stories like this. It's free. By subscribing, you help support our community in creating and sharing these captivating tales from cultures worldwide. New uploads arrive weekly. Subscribe now to never miss an upload.
When Jude found out about the crash, he could not breathe. His parents, the same ones he had been so mean to, were dead. A terrible accident had killed them before they could make up with Jude. Jude held their photo frame tightly while tears ran down his face. He finally realized how selfish he had been and how much pain he had caused his parents who loved him so much. At that moment, he understood the depth of his mistakes. In the wake of his parents' untimely deaths, Jude found himself adrift, plagued by guilt and regret. He would spend long hours simply staring at their photograph, wrestling with the truth he had so stubbornly rejected, that his selfish behavior had robbed him of precious time with the very people who loved him most. Try as he might, Jude could not muster the strength to shed his lazy, indulgent lifestyle. The habits of a lifetime proved deeply ingrained, and he continued to fritter away his days in idleness, surrounded by the trappings of excess that had once brought him empty satisfaction. It was not until the reading of Senator James's will that Jude experienced a reckoning that would shake him to his core. Summoned to the family estate along with distant relatives, he found himself in the presence of the senator's longtime lawyer, a stern-faced man entrusted with executing his client's final wishes. As the lawyer droned on, wading through a mire of legal jargon and technicalities, Jude struggled to maintain his focus. His mind began to wander, falling back into the familiar pattern of indifference that had defined his life. However, his complacency was shattered when the lawyer uttered a profound statement that cut through the haze of Jude's ennui. Per the deceased's wishes, his entire business empire and assets shall be entrusted to his son, Jude, on one condition. The room went completely quiet as the lawyer got ready to speak. Even Jude, who had been bored earlier, sat up straight, feeling uneasy about what was coming. As your father wished, the lawyer said seriously, his entire business and all his money and property will go to you, Jude. But there is one condition. He paused to let his words sink in. You, Jude, must take full control of running the company yourself, and you must work very hard to pay off an enormous debt your father owes. Gasps filled the room from all the relatives. Jude's mouth hung open in disbelief. A huge debt? Him running the entire company? He could barely believe what he was hearing. Without stopping, the lawyer slid a very thick file folder across the table to Jude with a heavy thud. All the details are in here. he stated plainly. "Your father's company is about to fail because of these massive debts. If you don't fix it, everything he worked for will be destroyed." To Jude, that file seemed like a venomous snake, ready to strike his privileged lifestyle he took for granted. He flinched away from it, panic spreading across his face. The reality hit him. Either take over his father's company himself, or watch it collapse completely along with any wealth and status he had. Standing beside the lawyer was the company manager, a stern-looking woman loyal to Jude's father. She looked Jude directly in the eyes, silently judging whether this reckless son had what it takes to save the business and the jobs of all its employees. Only time would tell if Jude could live up to his father's final wish. In the days following the will reading, Jude found himself adrift in a sea of turmoil and self-doubt. The enormity of the task laid before him, righting the sinking ship that was his father's company, threatened to swallow him whole. He would spend long hours slumped in a chair, head cradled in his hands as the weight of his newfound responsibilities crushed him beneath its unyielding mass. Mercifully, the company manager proved to be an invaluable ally in those early days. Though her stern demeanor never wavered, she recognized in Jude a man drowning, desperately in need of a lifeline. With pragmatic efficiency, she briefed him on the company's dire financial straits, lecturing him on balance sheets and cash flow projections that may as well have been written in ancient Greek for all Jude could comprehend. Frustration soon bred resentment, and more than once Jude found himself lashing out at the manager, his fragile ego bruised by his own ineptitude. Heated arguments would erupt between them, devolving into shouting matches as Jude's famous tantrums reared their ugly head. Yet, through it all, the manager remained an implacable force, weathering Jude's outbursts with a stoic resolve that gradually wore away at his childish defenses. Slowly but surely, the harsh reality of his circumstances began to sink in. Rage and petulance would only hasten the company's demise. It was a harsh awakening, but one that ultimately stirred something within Jude that had long remained dormant, a glimmer of responsibility, of purpose. Nights became a blur of poring over financial reports and projections, his brow furrowed in intense concentration as he struggled to grasp concepts that had once been entirely foreign to him. Gradually, an unspoken respect kindled between Jude and the manager, born of the long hours they clocked together in pursuit of a shared goal. Where once their interactions had been tinged with disdain, a nascent partnership began to take root, grounded in the realization that only through unity of purpose could they hope to save the company from ruin. After learning about his father's debt, Jude felt completely lost and doubtful of himself. The huge task of fixing his father's struggling company was like a massive weight crushing him down. He would sit for hours alone, holding his head in his hands, feeling overwhelmed by all the responsibilities he now faced. Thankfully, the company manager helped Jude a lot in those early days. Though she always had a very serious face, she saw that Jude was like a person drowning who desperately needed help. She patiently explained the company's money problems to him, showing him charts about finances and budgets. To Jude, it all sounded like another language he couldn't understand. Before long, Jude's frustration turned into resentment towards the manager. He would frequently get angry and yell at her during meetings when she tried to teach him. Like a child having a tantrum, Jude would get into loud shouting matches when he felt his pride was hurt by not understanding. But no matter how angry Jude got, the manager stayed calm and resolved. She didn't react to his raging outbursts. Slowly, Jude started to realize that throwing tantrums would not save the company. It would only make things worse. It was a harsh wake-up call, but finally something changed inside of Jude that had been dormant for too long. A sense of responsibility and purpose. Night after night, he studied complex financial documents, furrowing his brow as he worked hard to understand concepts he never cared about before. Little by little, Jude and the manager developed a mutual respect through the long hours they spent working together toward the same goal. What used to be unpleasant interactions turned into an unspoken partnership, with both of them committed to saving the company from complete failure. At first, the turnaround effort was incredibly difficult for Jude. So many years of laziness and reckless living had left him unprepared for the round-the-clock work required to rescue the teetering company. But the looming threat of utter ruin prompted a startling transformation within him. Where once he would have zoned out or disrupted important meetings, Jude now listened with rapt attention, furiously scribbling notes as he soaked up every kernel of advice from his father's trusted managers. No topic was too tedious, no figures too mind-numbing. He attacked each new challenge with a fervor born of desperation. The plush comforts of his lavish home lay abandoned as overnight stints at the office became the norm. Haggard and bleary-eyed, Jude would toil into the early hours, crunching numbers and devouring market reports, unwilling to rest until he'd squeezed every ounce of productivity from the waning night. Painful sacrifices had to be made as Jude began trimming expenditures with ruthless efficiency. Long-standing employees, some of whom had worked alongside his father for decades, were made redundant, their tear-stained farewells a constant reminder of the human toll his father's debt had wrought. Yet for all the tough decisions, glimmers of his father's acumen began to flicker within Jude. Intense negotiations with potential investors, he displayed a newfound poise and shrewdness, driving hard bargains that would inject much-needed capital while retaining control of the company's operations. Slowly but surely, the company's fortunes began to turn. Each modest success was cause for shared celebration between Jude and the manager, their relationship having blossomed from tenuous partnership into one of deep mutual respect and solidarity. While hurdles still remained, a tangible sense of hope permeated the once flailing enterprise. Hope that the son could indeed make good on his father's dying wish. The effort to save the company was extremely draining for Jude at first. After so many years of laziness and not caring, he was not prepared for how hard he would have to work around the clock. But the very real threat of losing everything pushed Jude to change in a big way. As the months rolled by, Jude's transformation from aimless son to capable leader became undeniable. He now strode through the office corridors with a confident gait, greeting employees by name and inquiring about their lives beyond the workplace walls. Gone was the dismissive air too self-absorbed to acknowledge those beneath his status. Ghosts of decadent nights spent frittering away his inheritance no longer haunted Jude's every waking moment. Instead, his keen focus remained fixated on the future. Growth plans, prospective deals, avenues for expansion that could elevate the company to dizzying new heights. Each night, he burned the midnight oil, frantically sketching out strategies and crunching projections. Yet for all his driven ambition, Jude never lost sight of the human element. He made time to mentor promising young employees, imparting the harsh lessons of his formerly wasted youth. Under his guidance, they acquired skills practical and intangible, skills his father's fortune could never impart. One by one, milestones were reached, then surpassed, the company's debt successfully negotiated, a major contract renewal secured, entry into an untapped international market. With each achievement, Jude would proudly ring the ceremonial bell, the sound reverberating as a symbolic trophy of his hard-won victories. Through it all, the manager remained his steadfast ally, her stern exterior gradually softening into one of mutual love. What had begun as a contentious relationship between student and governess had blossomed into something far deeper, a bond forged in the crucible of struggle, tempered by shared sacrifice and triumph. In his quietest moments, Jude would gaze upon the photograph of his parents, a reminder of the man he had been and the man he had become. No longer did he feel the sting of regret. Instead, a sense of serene acceptance washed over him. He had honored their memory through perseverance against all odds. At long last, he had made them proud. Jude's remarkable turnaround did not go unnoticed in the business world. Before long, he was being invited to speak at prestigious corporate events, sharing his inspirational story of overcoming adversity. What once would have been his worst nightmare, public speaking, he now embraced with poise and confidence. The media soon latched onto the tale of the redeemed prodigal son. Newspaper headlines and magazine covers hailed Jude as a model of reinvention, a living embodiment of the entrepreneurial spirit. Awards and accolades poured in from every corner, a symbolic passing of the baton to a new generation of business leaders. However, Jude remained grounded despite his rising stature. He never missed an opportunity to open a new factory or branch office, proudly commemorating each expansion by cutting the ceremonial ribbon surrounded by cheering employees. These were his people now, united in their shared mission. Determined to truly honor his parents' legacy, Jude made it his personal cause to help underprivileged youth avoid the pitfalls of aimlessness. He launched major charitable initiatives, establishing scholarships and youth programs aimed at nurturing the next wave of societal contributors. On a more personal level, Jude's profound metamorphosis opened up new doors he had once written off. He fell in love with the company manager, and in a lavish but tasteful ceremony, took a brilliant and compassionate woman as his wife, finally surrounding himself with loved ones who appreciated his evolution rather than scorned it. The ultimate blessing arrived a couple of years later when Jude and his wife welcomed their first child into the world, a beautiful baby whose mere existence personified the redemptive power of unconditional love. As he cradled the newborn in his arms, tears streamed down Jude's face, tears of joy replacing those once born of anguish and regret. The years rolled by in what felt like the blink of an eye. Businesses were built, investments soared, and lives were touched through Jude's philanthropic efforts. When the day came for him to receive the crowning Lifetime Achievement Award, he stood before the crowd, grayed at the temples but youthful in spirit, as a transformed man. In the end, Jude's opulent family home was once again filled with the warmth of love and togetherness. His adoring wife by his side, his children playing joyfully after having been instilled with the values Jude had fought so hard to embrace in his own life's journey. As he gazed out over the wealth of love surrounding him, he finally felt his parents' proud smiles upon him, a reminder that redemption, while arduous, can ultimately lead to life's greatest riches.